Serious police of Reddit. Who was the worst criminal you've ever had to detain? What did they do? How did you feel once they'd been arrested? Had a call once in a major metropolitan area during my probation period some years ago. The fire department called us for help, saying they had been threatened with by knife, wilding maniac while attempting to render aid to someone. My partner and I got there and saw the FD just standing around. So we're thinking, okay, this guy is probably gone, and we will have to just take a report for them and get to our next call. That's the first time I heard the screams of someone about to die. The shrill terror in a person's voice is completely distinguishable from your everyday scream for help or yells of anger. It sends a shiver down your spine. My partner and I didn't have time for backup to arrive or make a tactical plan, so we entered an apartment complex by ourselves and followed the screams until we located a door we thought they were coming from. I kicked in the door, and we entered to find that knife, wilding madman stabbing a woman in the chest. Shots are fired, and the man goes down. As though a scene from a movie after the shooting backup comes running in to clear the rest of the apartment while I awkwardly handcuff this man who is bleeding all over my uniform. He's missing either his radius or ulna, one of the two wrist bones from a bullet shattering it. There's blood everywhere, and you can smell it in the air. This is also the first time I held a person while they were dying, which isn't particularly pleasant either. The man passed shortly after in the ambulance, even with the fire department outside already. We later discovered the man was on drugs and suffering from mental illness. He had attempted to kill himself a week prior and failed, so the higher-ups believe this is how he wanted to finish himself off. The woman survived. I was a detective in the town I worked at, and of course had to cover calls on a rotation. I was on call on Halloween one night, and got a call about a shooting that had just occurred in a fairly decent part of the town I worked in. I was already out due to another incident, and decided to head on that way, figuring if there was anything to it, I would get called anyways. Being that it was Halloween in the part of town, I of course thought this was just another prank call. As I'm heading to the call, dispatch advised that they are getting multiple calls and reports of multiple victims. With this, I realized this probably wasn't a prank call, and actually ended up being the first person on scene. Turns out that some kids were trick-or-treating, and when they knocked on the door of this one house, the guy inside freaked out and unloaded an AK-47 through the glass door into two kids and the father. The kids being over 10, but less than 14. The oldest child took most of the bullets, killing him. The father and the younger child survived. I then spent 3 hours interviewing the suspect. I've interviewed a lot of suspects, murders included, and this was the most mentally and physically exhausting interview of my life. That was almost 8 years ago, and the whole thing still haunts me. First post. Throwaway account. I'm terrible with dates and time frames if I didn't write it down, but I'll never forget October 26th, 2013. This was in Brooklyn. Squad called an 85 at such and such address. A neighbor had called in an assault in progress, and the detective squad happened to be on the block for another reason. They got there fast and met the perp coming out the front door. We get there a couple minutes after as the perp is being walked in handcuffs to the car. I went into the house to see if everybody was okay and what the 85 was about. Long story short, perp hacked a woman and her 4 kids, infant of 12 years old, to death with a meat cleaver. Mom and oldest were still breathing when we came in the door, but not for long after that. 3 babies were all in the back bedroom. The apartment looked pretty much like what you would imagine if you tried to imagine something like that. You could taste the blood in the air. There was so much of it. When I walked out to get a look at the perp, a detective told me, "See if you can get his name, but don't ask him anything else." Guy was seated in the back seat in handcuffs and had a look in his eyes that I can't even describe here. The devil was let loose in that apartment. Received a call from a concerned neighbor in an apartment complex. She advised a female upstairs was screaming for help. Me and my partner conducted a knock and talk, and a very large male answered the door wearing boxers. We asked him if anyone else was in the apartment. He looked back towards the bedroom, turned, and looked back at us, and paused for a second, and then said no. Me and my partner looked at each other, sensing something was wrong. We looked down and observed blood on the tile floor, and made entry due to exigent circumstances. I spoke with a male in the living room, and I see he was getting extremely worried. My partner walked into the bedroom, and I see his face lose its color. He stepped back and started shouting, "Lock his ass up now." He then tried to make a run for it. After he was detained, we returned to the room, and I saw a girl locked in a dog cage, beaten half to death. The investigation revealed he had been holding her hostage in the apartment for several months, raping her and pimping her out to sick fucks and forcing her to eat dog food. She was unable to stand. I believe both legs and arms were broken. Both eye sockets were so badly broken and bruised they swelled up over her eyes. The bed sheet, which I could only assume was once white, was completely covered in blood stains. I've been on the scene of somewhere around 100+ murders, countless auto fatalities, and everything in between, and to this day, it's just about the only thing that gets to me. I couldn't understand how someone could be that evil. When I returned to my patrol vehicle to run their information, I looked at her driver's license photo and couldn't recognize her. That's how badly she had been beaten. I've seen her once since the incident. She is now blind in both eyes and can still hardly walk. It sucks to think about how many times Eve been at that apartment building on other calls while she was locked in a cage and had probably been standing just feet away from her. The entire time the suspect was in my back seat, he was just staring me down through my rearview mirror with the smuggest fucking grin on his face. I had to step out of the car and get away from him because I was getting so worked up. I don't think there's a punishment severe enough for that monster. Copy and paste of a previous post, because I don't enjoy typing this story out. Cop here. I responded to a child not breathing. On arrival, I find a 2-year-old girl, wearing only undies, unconscious on the cement kitchen floor. She is freezing cold, pale, foaming at the mouth, and barely breathing. I spent the next 6 hours by her side as detectives learned that Mom's boyfriend was pissed that she wouldn't stop crying. So he picked up by the waist, over his head, and slammed her on the ground. Twice. When Mom got out of the shower, he told her she wasn't breathing right. Mom uses the girl's asthma inhaler twice and waits. An hour and a half later, she goes to her neighbor's house to use her phone to call her mom. The neighbor overhears the conversation about baby not breathing and takes it upon herself to call 911. The girl received a basal skull fracture, which caused little seizures. She vomited several times, but lay on her back for over an hour. She aspirated the vomit repeatedly. For nearly 2 hours, that little girl lay on the ground with her skull bleeding into her brain, her body temp being sucked into the floor, trying to breathe vomit. And for the next 6 hours I sat with her and held her hand, stroked her hair, and watched her die, hoping that her little brain shut down and blocked out everything that was happening. That case still makes me tear up to this day, and it was one of the 3 worst calls I've ever been on. I don't know how someone can do that to a baby. Asterisk edit. I apologize for the lack of clarity. I wrote this last night through tear-filled eyes, and then went to bed. Paramedics were called. They arrived seconds after I did. They did everything they could. I rode in the ambulance with her to the hospital. I stayed with her the entire time, because in a possible death investigation, we keep an officer with the person throughout, until the medical examiner takes custody of the body. So I stayed with her in the ER, went to CT scan with her, etc. Her little brain had been deprived of oxygen too long. There was no surgery that could save her. BF fled during the initial chaos of officers and medics arriving. He was caught later that night, without incident. He was charged and convicted, but that doesn't undo what he did. How do you deal? That's a good one. You come home and hug your own kids. You have a beer with the other guys that were on scene. You realize that if it weren't for your job, assholes like that would get away with it. And then you get in your car and do it all again tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Be good to each other. Stories like this and others can be found at /Tales from the Squad Car. Edit. Hey guys, thanks a bunch for the overwhelming response and support. Quit with the gold. If you want to pay it forward, next time you're in line with a cop, buy his coffee or soda and say thanks for what you do. Those little moments really do help. My dad is a firefighter. He responded to a case like this one, but the girl was 5 years old. The father would beat her, and the mother would neglect her. The parents split, and the abusive father took her and married an even more aggressive stepmother when child turned 4. The father admitted to beating the child at least once a day, because she did things like have bathroom accidents. They never taught her to properly use the bathroom. They used bats, belts, and anything within arm's reach. The child was malnourished and neglected, with healing bruises and fresh bruises. 3 days prior to her death, the couple refused to clothe and bathe her, leaving the child to live in her own feces. The child's last day was spent in her room, unfurnished and covered in feces. Beaten, then left unattended as the couple went to work. Upon return, her dad whipped her with his belt for the last time. When my dad responded, he went to a room layered in feces with blood splattered on the wall and floor where the girl had laid still, covered in her own blood and vomit, while experiencing seizures due to the trauma. As a first responder, it was my dad's duty to save her. He gave her CPR, frantically trying to do everything in his power to save her as if the child was his own. There was nothing he could do but watch her die slowly as he held her. Later investigation found that the child had been whipped and hit in her chest, knocking her to the ground. The father then proceeded to stomp on her chest and head, causing her ribs to break, along with brain bleeding and a dislocated shoulder. Although my state ended the death penalty in 1957, the crime had occurred on federal property, and thus the father was up for the death penalty. This caused the trial to drag on for 10 years. For each of those years, my father deteriorated in his mental state and developed alcohol abuse, later leading to a few small domestic violence cases. He suffers from PTSD now, and the father I grew up with is no longer present. Hats off to you for keeping your sanity. I honestly feel that the majority of the people I arrest aren't bad people and aren't criminals, per se. That being said, there are a couple dozen arrests that stand out in my mind. One in particular sticks out. Not necessarily the worst, just one that sticks out the most. The suspect was approximately 40-ish, had a 15-year-old daughter, was a methamphetamine addict, lived in complete squalor. They get evicted and daughter gets taken into state custody. After a year of counseling, finally discloses that her father would inject her with methamphetamine and rape her. Therapist comes to us, and we bring her in for an interview. This girl, I believe may have been 17 by now, is no girl. She's intelligent, articulate, and lived well beyond her years. She details in remarkable detail how one night her father injects methamphetamine into right forearm. This happens several times. One night he is extremely high, gets her high. As she is walking into the kitchen, he pins her against the wall and rapes her. This begins to happen on a regular basis. Suspect eventually convinces daughter to start bringing friends home. Suspect injects friends with methamphetamine and rapes them as well. Daughter continues to bring different friends home, so that dad will rape the friends rather than her. Eventually, when they get evicted, father kicks daughter to the curb, and two of daughter's friend go live out of dad's car in a nearby park. While these kinds of things happen all the time, it was the victim that struck me. When asked why she didn't tell someone, she replied, "The first time it happened when he pinned me against the wall, all I could remember thinking over and over, this is my life now. This is my life now. I will remember those words for the rest of my life, as clear as they were said to me. I can still hear the inflection and tone in her voice." About 8 months later, I ran into one of the other victims, the daughter's friend. After dad was evicted, he lived out of his car with her. She was 15-ish at the time. Initially, she was going to cooperate in prosecution, however, disappeared. She's 18 to 19 now. When I last saw her, I didn't recognize her until I saw her identification. Heroin, methamphetamine, and the streets have destroyed her. She won't be alive much longer. Requesting. Someone who has seen a ghost, literally. I don't believe a single one of you. Okay, here's mine. Feel free to debunk. I'm a skeptic, so I'd welcome an explanation. My mother, sister, and I lived in a very old house for a couple of years. There were 3 situations that passed the line of easily explained for me. First, I arrived home from school one day and was alone. I went into the bathroom, and while I was on the toilet, the bathroom door, which I had left slightly ajar, because I'm a real class act, slammed shut. This could have been an air pressure thing. The place was drafty as hell. What I can't explain is how the door locked itself. It had one of those old deadbolt-style locks that required one of those long-stemmed antique keys to lock and unlock. I don't know if it was easy to operate, because we did not have a key, and never had. I'd slammed that door countless times, and it had never locked. After several hours in the bathroom, a neighbor came over to attempt picking the lock. When this failed, he tried to break it in. He kicked the door once and was getting ready to hit it again when there was an audible click, and it just swung open. Number 2. Should have made this one the toilet story. My mother, sister, a babysitter, the owners of the house, and myself all saw a figure we interpreted to be a taller-than-average woman in a full-length dress with long straight blonde hair. Mom saw it first in her bedroom once, and in the living room in broad daylight another time. She said nothing to anyone because the rent was cheap, we were broke, and she didn't want a couple paranoid kids asking to move out. The babysitter, who was a family friend, reported seeing a woman sitting on the porch swing through the living room window, but found nobody there when she walked out the front door. She saw someone similar in the yard on another occasion, but we had neighbors, so I have to wonder about that one. When I saw it, I had been asleep and woke to find someone standing over my bed. No creepiness, no dread, or anything, just a lady standing there. There was a definite chill in the air. She turned and left. My mom had a friend who was roughly similar in stature and appearance, so I assumed it was her. I got up and went into the hallway, and there was no one there. When I woke my mom, she said Sue was not staying with us that night. I didn't think of it as a ghost at the time, just something weird. It was 5 a.m. when this happened, so I just stayed up after that. This makes me doubt it was a dream. It wasn't until a year after we'd moved out that Mom raised the possibility of there having been a ghost. She mentioned having seen a something, and I described what I saw. Her description matched mine. After that, we asked other people who had stayed with us and got the account from the babysitter. Her description matched ours, without prompting from Mom. We were renting the place from the owners, who were friends of my parents, and they also admitted to thinking the place was haunted when we asked them a couple years later. They didn't bring it up at the time because they thought they were nuts for thinking so. Same tall blonde woman. My sister claims to have seen something, but she was in kindergarten at the time, and I have to wonder if she was dreaming. Her description matches ours, but she related it some time after hearing our tales, so that could have colored the memory. Third, the place was just generally weird. There was a certain dread about the house that I honestly can't explain away with bad architecture and low-budget decor. People did not like being in the house for very long. It was always cold, 365 days a year. The air was rarely on during the summer, but in the winter we would crank the furnace and still have to start a fire in the living room to keep warm. The place was big, drafty, and old, but it had a new furnace, and it should have made some kind of difference. Nobody would go into the basement for any reason. I don't think I ever got more than halfway down the stairs, and even my dad found excuses to avoid going down there to check on the whole woefully inadequate furnace situation. Mom had the washer and dryer set up in the kitchen to avoid going down there. My friends would agree to stay the night and ask to go home before bedtime. I should stress, this was absolutely not a spooky-looking house. It was bright red on the outside, well-lit inside, cheerful-looking, and not at all a house you would think looked haunted. For what it's worth, whenever I've driven by since, up to this day, I've never seen the place without a for sale sign out front. I had a ghost experience in my last house. I was 13, and my bedroom was on the bottom floor of my raised ranch house. The rest of my family had bedrooms upstairs. The very first night I slept down here, it was extremely eerie, and I always had the feeling that something or someone was watching me. I'd had weird things happen every now and then, like hearing footsteps, random knocks, things moved, etc. Maybe 2 months later, I go to sleep one night and turn the light off and shut the lights off and shut my door and go to sleep. I woke up at 2 a.m. with every single hair on my body standing up, and I immediately noticed the light outside my door is on and my bedroom door is open. I turn over slowly, and I start to hear footsteps, which sound like they're in front of my room walking down the hall. So I'm terrified, staring at my open doorway with the light on, hearing these footsteps, and I hear 2 jiggles on the locked door down the hall. Not a doubt in my mind what the sound was. I use that door every day, and that door leads to the garage, which was closed, so it was jiggled from the inside. To this day, I have never felt as absolutely fucking petrified I was when I heard this. I literally couldn't move. Then I heard the footsteps again, maybe 5 or 6 of them walk over from the door back to in front of my room. I just could feel a presence there, I was aware of what was happening. I did what any 13-year-old did. I turned over slowly toward the wall and closed my eyes hard as I could and forced myself to sleep. I eventually moved out of that house, but goddamn never experienced anything like that before or since. 5 years later, I come to find out that the grandfather of the family, who lived in my old house before us, died in the downstairs bedroom that I was living in. I had experiences when I was 7 or 8 with what I'd like to call a ghost, but since I have no hard evidence besides what I have seen and what others who lived in the house have experienced, I will just call them strange events. These people include my mother, the landlady, and previous residents. Biggest event: my second-floor bedroom was rectangular in shape. At the top corner of the long side was the door linked to my mother's room. At the bottom corner of the opposite long side was the door/mini hall to my playroom. I decided to go into my playroom after school one day and stopped in the doorway between my mother's room and mine. In the doorway to the playroom there was a black mass in the shape of a woman in a dress, much like a shadow, but opaque. The light from the playroom, now in full force because of the direction of the window and the time of day, was spilling around her. This is going to sound crazy, but even though this shadow woman was a black mass, I got this feeling of purple. Either she was wearing purple, or the whole thing was setting off my synesthesia. I froze in total fear because I knew it was only my mother and I in the house, and if this was real then there was a break-in. I bolted down the stairs to tell my mom, who went immediately upstairs and made rounds of the place. There was no one there and no sign of a break-in, windows closed and locked. The second floor would have been unreachable except by shimmying up a tree or climbing the porch roof, and this would have been in full daylight on a busy street with kids and parents in the neighborhood being out. Over a year, silly little things kept happening. Things would go missing, which happens easily when you have 8 years old and a full-time working mom in the house. We would search the house up and down for a week, and then inevitably would find those things in the most obvious places, on the kitchen counter or dining room table, or on the floor in the living room. We never attributed those things to anything but our own absent-mindedness. In the backyard, my mom would plant flowers each fall. Each spring they would always come up white: tulips, roses, daisies, lilies, and various other things. It didn't matter where she got the bulbs from or in what packets, multicolored or a single color. It could have been animals digging up the bulbs and leaving the previous year's bulbs alone, since a certain previous resident, who will be clear just below, liked white flowers. The landlady came about a year after the shadow incident to check in on the house. She and my mom were talking for a bit when she asked if my mom had met Mrs. Kaufman yet. Thinking it was a neighbor, my mom commented that we had met everyone in the neighborhood and knew no Mrs. Kaufman. The landlady laughed and said Mrs. Kaufman was a ghost in our house who wore purple and took things. Mrs. Kaufman's father had built the house back in the late 1800s. Mrs. Kaufman was born, raised, and died there. My mom, thinking I was just being a spooky kind of kid, had told no one of my sighting in the playroom doorway or the things that kept going missing and reappearing. They talked for a bit more, and the landlady, who had bought the house after Mrs. Kaufman died and lived there for a few years before putting it up for rent, said Mrs. Kaufman's garden had been full of white flowers when she moved in, and later residents had remarked that the bulbs kept coming up white every year. She also told my mom that in order to get things back that went missing, all she had to do was ask nicely, and we'd get them back faster than just a week. Getting back my crayon. A few weeks after the landlady and my mom had talked, my red crayon went missing. It was out of my box of 72, and we searched around the house before I went to school. I had used it the night before to do a school assignment and needed to take it with me. When we couldn't find it, she sent me on the bus to school and searched the house herself. She could very well have overlooked it, but she told me she asked Mrs. Kaufman to give the crayon back because I really needed it. She then went into the dining room a bit later, and it was sitting in the middle of the dining room table. From then on, we would ask Mrs. Kaufman to return things that went missing, and they would appear in obvious places over the course of a day. These could all be coincidences that just lined up perfectly. It was a strange house, but I loved it, and eventually the whole Mrs. Kaufman thing became a running joke with me and my mom. Since nothing could be backed up with hard evidence, and I have yet to see another ghost, or have anything strange happen to me. I just like to say it was an odd time in my life, where odd things happened that I can't explain. My friend and I are swim instructors for our local town. The pond was closed due to contamination, so our boss man agreed to ship us over to the old school youth center to clean the hell out of it. The place had not been adequately cleaned in 15 plus years, so my friend and I, we'll call her Your Highness, loaded up with hardcore chemical cleaners and set to work sweating our tits off in 90-degree heat while rigorously scrubbing every inch, every corner. A week went by and nothing happened. About 2 days into the second week, I was in the basement area where the bathrooms, pool tables, foosball tables, etc. are located. Now, the place has 3 staircases. 2 are located in the middle of the building, the third on the right-hand side. At the time, Your Highness was cleaning the side stairwell, a good 25 feet away from where I was standing. I could hear her laboring away. As I was sweeping about, I hear the bathroom door slam shut. The bathroom door is situated adjacent to the side stairwell. When I ask her why she is slamming doors, she asks me what I am talking about it. Your Highness did not hear it. Day 3 this time Your Highness and I are upstairs working in the b-ball court. We are cleaning the sideboards when we hear the pool tables being used downstairs, multiple breaks, balls rolling around. Your Highness, and I think that some little turds are fucking our cleanliness up, have broken in through the downstairs, so we hightail it down there. Me down the center stairwell, Your Highness down the side stairwell, so as to catch him. Well, we reach each other before we reach any rascals. There was no other way out of the building, and the doors were locked from the inside. Day 4 Your Highness and I are working in the main office of the youth center. The music machine is merrily playing in the b-ball court, which we could not see from the office. Abruptly, the music turns off. Your Highness goes to investigate. The machine has been unplugged. At this point we start to joke about how the chemicals, bleach, heavy-duty cleaners, are starting to have an impact on our sanity. But the music had just stopped. The machine had been plugged in previously. There was no one else in the building. We begin to become more wary of this place. Day 5 all day long we hear children's voices in the basement, mostly laughing, but some inaudible whispers are heard from the tops of the stairs. We both try not to freak the other one out and pretend that we do not hear anything until finally there is such a high-pitched cackle that we both run from opposite areas of the building for safety. We sit, and we listen, and we leave work early. Day 6 final chore at the youth center. Thoroughly mop the floors. Your Highness and I are thrilled that we are getting out of this place. At this point we are a little skittish. Every dropped broom scares the hell out of us. Up until this point the energy in the place has been fairly chipper. No discernible negativity whatsoever. Around 3 p.m. on day 6 the air changes. It is palpable. It's like an increased pressure on the chest. Your Highness and I decide we need to clean the floor and get out for some Mai Tais immediate. We scrub and Your Highness begins to mop. The place is spotless. We go back into the b-ball court to turn off the fans, do a final look over in the basement together, and head back upstairs. The wet floor is now covered in footprints. Dirty footprints. Barefoot, slippered, you name it. I don't believe in ghosts. I have never seen a ghost. But I was never more scared than I was those 6 days in that building. Looked into it. Could find no fire or tragedies that had occurred. However, in this area of our town there were a plethora of native burial grounds. So, fast food employees have read it. What is the most disgusting secret that your chain keeps from the public? Everybody wants to believe that fast food restaurants are disgusting and have terribly low standards for everything. But the reality is that they wouldn't be able to stay in business if this was the case. On the contrary, many fast food places have absurdly high standards for cleanliness and food preparation. For 2 years, I managed a Jimmy John's franchise, and frankly, you could eat off the bathroom floor, and that's not an exaggeration. Corporate stullies keep such a tight watch on individual franchises that a business owner risks losing their contract if they stray from compliance in any major way. The food may not always be the best quality, though JJ's meat is surprisingly decent quality, but you know that you get what you pay for. If you want a $5 meal, most fast food restaurants will provide that to you without you having to worry about what's going on behind the scenes. Edit. Since some people are getting upset over the fact that their anecdotal experience didn't match this statement on one or two occasions, I would like to clarify that no, this doesn't apply to 100% of restaurants. I wouldn't think that would have to be said, but I guess it did. Worked at a financially failing Domino's pizza franchise. Behind the scenes, we're incredibly clean. Much cleaner than my own home. The entire restaurant was disassembled and cleaned each night. We'd close at 2 a.m. and not leave until 3 a.m. or so. To open the store, you need to reassemble everything. All products have dates. Food was thrown away on their date. Temperatures checked by staff. Inspections by the county health agency were a periodic thing. The medical device company I now work for. Dirty. Cheats the rules. Makes fake documents. I think we even have fake document department that just falsifies things that are expensive to do. Worked at McDonald's, and honestly, there wasn't really anything exceedingly gross or secret. These days, the big fast food chains are pretty transparent about how their food is produced. If anything was gross, it was because of somebody doing something they weren't supposed to that was against company policy. If anything, I guess I always thought it a little unnerving that the smaller hamburger patties, the non-quarter pounder ones, went from frozen to fully cooked in about 20 seconds if I remember right. Beyond that, everything seemed legit. If anything, I would be more worried about smaller, independent restaurants, diners, etc. Edit. Keep in mind that when you work at a fast food restaurant, it's not like you're initiated into a secret society or anything. If there were any secrets about the food, they would be leaked in no time, as fast food chains employ millions of workers around the world. I worked at Arby's in high school, and the facility and everything was pretty standard for cleanliness. However, as with most restaurants, people can be gross, and there's not much you can do to get away from that. I don't know what it is with restaurants and people sleeping together. People be horny, is what I'm saying. Well, there was this girl who worked there, and she messed around with one of the guys who made the sandwiches. During a few minutes without customers, they sneaked back to the supply room, and he finger-banged her back there. I was cleaning up the front counter, getting ready to go home, when the drive-thru beep came on. So the girl rushed back to the window to take the order, and he hopped up to the slicer to start making the food. After the blissfully unaware customer drove off with their meal, I heard him say to the girl, "Aw man, you know what I just remembered? I didn't wash my hands." Worked at Taco Bell in college. The most disgusting thing was probably that salaried managers made about the same or less per hour than hourly wage employees. There was really nothing unsanitary. The food is all low-quality cheap shit, of course, but there's nothing actually wrong with it. I don't know how the hell people get sick after eating there. They must have incredibly weak digestive systems. There's never any raw meat in the store. It all comes pre-cooked and just gets warmed up. Oh, actually, thought of one thing. The taco salad bowls are all fried up in the morning. So if you get one late in the day, it's been sitting in the warmer for a while. That's about it. Sometimes the chalupa shells sit around a while too. If you want fresh ones, just ask. It's appreciated if you come inside the store though, so it doesn't affect the drive-through times, as they take a couple minutes to fry. I worked at a Starbucks where they allowed a full-on roach infestation. More on the DM and managers than corporate, but it really got to a point where Seattle must have known. They were everywhere. The pastry case, in the storage, around the dry powders, but the worst was a saw one. And just to make this clear, this 100% happened. Crawl out of the espresso spout in the machines. As employees, we were on the front line, trying to defend our location, even though a huge majority thought it was disturbing. Eventually, one of our regulars put in a complaint at the health department. It was about the time I put in my 2 weeks' notice, and my manager blamed me specifically for it. I honestly didn't care. Starbucks is a hilariously simple job with the hardest task consisting of lifting 10 pounds and the most complex task being holding a milk pitcher at an angle to create foam for milk. TLDR, Starbucks roach infestation. I got blamed for whistleblowing. Although I was innocent, I took the blame though because the job is a joke. Being heavily involved in fast food jobs since I was old enough to work and am now a manager at a fast food place. Drugs. Everywhere. Drug deals in the back of the kitchen, in the parking lot, in the bathroom, or walk-in. It used to be worse before, apparently. My BF, who was higher than me, told me in the old days, They would all hang out in employee parking even if it wasn't their shift, and just everyone would constantly switch cars while doing various drugs. When I became a manager, I cussed an employee out when she came in on meth. Not about her coming in on meth, for not doing any work. My BF also tells me he came in and worked in the kitchen for a bit when it wasn't even his shift because he was rolling. Lastly, to this day 90% of the employees come in with eyes redder than Satan's dick. I used to be one of them, but a higher-up singled me out, and now I don't do it to spite them. This is most fast food places. I guess all I can tack on is, everyone hates the corporation portion. Lots of faceless assholes that have probably never worked at the actual restaurant. So cussing us out for only putting the amount of ketchup they tell us to in the back, or because we charge for water, is kind of pointless. We don't sit around deciding what evil thing to do next. We just do what we're told for money. Found my wife cheating on me last night. Struggling. I tried posting this on another related subreddit, and it was removed. I read the rules here, and I'm very sure it doesn't violate any for this sub. Please mods, if you want to remove this, let me know why. I'm trying to find support for the turmoil I'm feeling, and I don't know who else to turn to but anonymous people on the internet. Anyway, here goes. I met my wife in 2011. I was DING a social event at school and playing some 90s rocks. I was playing Third Eye Blind, and my wife liked the song that came on. She talked to me. We bonded over our mutual love of the band. Yada yada. We started dating. Fast forward to 2013. We got engaged, and we took a trip, and to celebrate. We have this memory we talk about a lot of listening to the whole Third Eye Blind catalog and singing along to all the songs together. We got married that year. Fast forward through our whole marriage. We had this thing where we would try to see the band as much as we could. We saw them whenever they were on tour. A total of 9 times during our 9 years of marriage. Last night, we were supposed to see them for the 10th time. If you're the math in your head, we've been married for 10 years as well. That's coming up in November. So I had this whole thing planned where we would go see the show, stay over at a hotel, have a romantic night. I get home from work on Friday. My wife is getting ready. She looks amazing. I see a text come on her phone. You know how the rest of the story goes. I don't even want to type it. She met some guy the night before when I was away for work. The part that killed me the most was she wrote that he needed to get condoms, and he's LOL. So I'm left wondering, did they even use any? What does it matter anymore anyway? After reading that I just left the house and started for the concert, she calls me about 15 minutes later like, "Where are you?" "Oh, you know, just on the way to the show." "What? Why?" "You know why." Think long and hard as to why I might be acting this way. I just hang up. Anyway, I think I was in shock still. I was pretty cool about it. But there's some backstory there I don't want to get into as to why I was prepared. She's cheated twice before in the past. I didn't really have any emotions at the time. Actually, when I started typing this, was the first time I felt anything. So she calls back and starts going through the motions. "Oh, we're just friends. Oh, we didn't actually do it. Oh, I was drunk. Oh, it was just in a little bit." Then it was all come back, and let's talk about this like adults, as if I'm the childish one for having stormed out. I'm thinking, no. If that happens, I'm not seeing this show. We're just going to talk about how she cheated, and she's going to try and seduce me. And that thought grossed me out. I never thought about sex with my wife and felt gross, but then I did. So I got to the concert, and the guy scanned my ticket. He looks at me and says, "There's 2, indicating that he wanted to scan the other one. I just stared at him blankly and said yes. "There's 2, and went inside. I was so weird. I felt like I was hypnotized. And then there was the show. Amazing show. I had a good time. I met some nice people in my row, and we had a fun time enjoying the concert together. Some lyric hit a little differently. I've never been so alone, and I've never felt more alive. I felt pretty alive at the concert. I danced with the crowd and screamed my frustrations into the loudspeakers. No one could hear me over the loud rock music. It was over pretty early. I wanted to sit at the bar and drink, but that would have required talking to someone, and I just couldn't outside of the context of the concert. I was thinking about the texts again. So I went to the hotel I had booked for my wife and I, and went to sleep alone. I woke up to about 30 emails. She was up all night, feeling all kinds of emotions, I guess. Guilt, shame, anger, anger at me. Those were the most surreal, the ones where she was mad at me for going through her phone. A lot of bargaining and pleading. The worst was she had sent me cards I had written for her years before. Anniversary cards, birthday cards, Christmas cards. I always hand-wrote a letter for her, professing my love for her. I never used to write anyone cards like these, but I did for her. She used to write cards like these for me. She hasn't in a number of years. I think her intent was that upon reading the cards, my heart would soften, and I would realize how much I loved her. I would come to my senses and come to her, and we would talk it through, and I would forgive her, and it would all be better. But instead it just made me realize how much she doesn't love me. At this point, I can't forgive her. I forgave her once, and here we are. If I forgive her again, it's just a matter of when, not if. I'm back in the same scenario, writing sob stories on Reddit. The only question now is whether I respect myself to make sure this never happens to me again. I 26F refused to submit to my boyfriend 28M. This has led to a lot of discord amongst both of our families, and them telling me to suck it up and be the woman he needs me to be. Right now, I'm staying with my sister while we figure things out. This all began the other day when my BF and I got into an argument over split chores in the house. I had gotten home from work and came back to a dirty home. There were water bottles and trash on the floor, along with milk still being out for however long, and dirty dishes in the sink. To say the house was a mess would be an understatement. It was my boyfriend's day off today, but I had to work so he was home alone. I work in the ER and often have to do 12 to 16-hour shifts. He works in a warehouse and has a 40-hour work week, which I understand can be some back-breaking work, which is why I do what I do for him in the first place. Still, I manage to cook, clean, and pack food for both him and I, all while he does the bare minimum, like taking out the trash or making sure he doesn't leave toothpaste on the bathroom sink. On this particular day, I had a rough day at work and was hoping to come home to a clean house, shower, and get some rest. It was my Friday, and I was finally getting paid. I just wanted to relax. But unfortunately, when I came back home, the house was a mess, and he had guessed a few hours prior, without my knowledge. I found him in the room bundled up like a sleeping peaceful baby. I was furious. I didn't even say anything to him. I simply showered and slept in our guest bedroom. I was woken a few hours later by him, yelling at me, saying how lazy I was for just coming home and going to sleep. I yelled at him back saying, if you wanted the house to be clean, you should have gotten your lazy ass up and cleaned up your own mess yourself. I am not your maid, nor am I your mother. He yelled at me back, saying that it was my duty as the woman of the house to keep it clean, and that he wished I was like his mom because she did her job. When he said that, a flip in my head just switched. I argued back saying that if he wanted me to be like his mom, that he should be like his dad to be a better provider. And I quit my job. He said that he was the man of the house, and whatever he says goes. I don't remember entirely what I told him, but said something along the lines of, no, you aren't the man of the house. I am. I go to work, pay most of the bills, clean the house, cook almost every meal you eat, all while being pregnant. You can't even comprehend how exhausted I am. I am tired of your lazy ass doing nothing but come home from work, eat, and sleep. You don't help me with shit. A man is supposed to lead, but I always have to take initiative in this relationship, and I'm tired of it. We're not even married, and you're expecting me to step into the wifely role while you act like a kid. He said, see, this is why I haven't asked you to marry me. My heart dropped into my stomach. I told him that if he was never planning to marry me anyways, that we should go our separate ways, and for him to stop wasting my time. I packed up and left, deactivated the tracking system I have in my car and phone, and has since blocked him. I am so hurt. I have invested so much of my time, money, and life into this man, and I receive nothing in return. As much as I want a baby, I don't want one that bad. I was set on leaving him until his mom called me last night and said I was stepping out of line as his woman, and that I should have just cleaned up, and that it wasn't that hard for me to do. This all could have been avoided if I decided to be the bigger person and clean up after him. that it is God's word that I, as a woman, should submit to her man. I am now second-guessing my decision in terminating my pregnancy and ending my relationship over something so small like cleaning. But I know that no matter what, it won't be enough for him, and that I most likely will not get the ring I deserve. I know that there is someone out there who wants to give me the world, not this little ghetto corner of California that he has to offer me. But I do love him. Growing up without either parent in my life, if I decided to keep my baby, I want my child to have both parents in their life. What should I do? Reddit. Edit. I appreciate the majority of you encouraging me to leave my current situation. I'd like to answer some questions and concerns that were brought up in the comments. Yes, there was a tracker on my car and phone. Why? Because last year someone broke into my car and tried to steal it. Luckily, we had a tracker installed in the car when it was bought from the dealership, so we were able to locate it. And I tend to lose my phone often or forget where it's at, so I would have him ping my phone location so I can find it. Also, for safety reasons, I share my location with my mom as well. He didn't know I was pregnant. I told him then and there. The reason why I didn't tell him was because I wanted to surprise him. We had a stillborn a few years back, and has since been very cautious about the topic of children again. I didn't want to tell him and have him get too excited just to lose it again, so I was waiting till I was more far along, which is why terminating the pregnancy was a hard choice to make and is still a pending decision. This baby is wanted, but at the end of the day, I need to make the decision on what is best for me and my situation. I'm taking time from him. It was childish on both of our parts to lash out on each other and say hurtful things with the intent of hurting each other. I'm giving him time to really think about what he wants in life, because I know what I want. I want to get married. I want to have children. I want to have a stable and peaceful life. We've been together for 7 years. If I'm not what he wants, sucks to be him. I can build my own life on my own. And as for those who got so much negative feedback about my situation, know that you've lived a pretty privileged life if you think it can't get this bad. Tomorrow, I'm going to ruin his life. I have been with him for 3 years now. We planned on getting married when our lives settled down. I wanted to start a family with him. I loved him more than anyone else in this world. I've sacrificed so much for him, moved away from my home, turned down jobs so I could stay with him, and stood by his side as he started to go back to school. I gave him my world, and he cheats on me. I found out over a month ago. The scumbag got cocky, and I found out he was cheating on me with 2 different women. One is a TA at his university, the other his best friend's girlfriend. I am livid. I write this post choking back venom. I loved him so much. He was my world, but now he will be the world I burn to nothing but ash. I pay for everything since he quit his job last year to go to school. I was more than happy to help him. I make enough to support us both. The only upside is the student loans are in his name, with no connection to me. It will hurt to push the scumbag out to sea, but I will survive. I have held out for a month. Enough time to create what I call the day his world burns. Tomorrow we are hosting a party. I arranged for his family to come, but my family will sadly not be able to make it. I have packed everything valuable already, and the suitcase is in the back of my car. My brother will come during the event tomorrow to take the car that is in my name that the dirtbag drives to my parents' house. The joint account, which is all my money anyway, is already empty. The event will be great, and he thinks it's for us to announce our engagement to his family. What will happen in reality is I will announce my departure from his life. I have already taken a job out of state and have lined up a new place to live. I will start by telling everyone what he is into. The screenshots of him asking his friend's girlfriend to piss on him, and the many other fantasies his degenerate mind came up with will be passed around. I will hand him the notice to vacate, as I have already broken our lease. We need to be out by the end of the month. I will then end off by informing him I have already reported he was sleeping with the TA for one of his classes the previous semester to the university, and that I am sad I won't see the fallout from that. His friend also has a message for him that I will deliver, informing him that his friend group never wants to see him again as well. And with that, I will leave. I will not look back. I will set his life on fire and walk away. Edit. 2 hours and over 5K upvoted. I should have expected my story and planned to get popular. I will update once all is said and done. Update. I have made an update. Go find it. Gynecologists of Reddit. What's the worst thing you've seen / most awkward experience? My sister's boyfriend was doing a gyno rotation. He was quite upset, as he was examining a woman that from sight and smell alone it was obvious she had cervical cancer, so advanced that she wasn't going to make it. For the first time on that rotation, he had to warn someone about their imminent death. It was all very depressing and solemn, so it was quite a relief when it turned out to be a tampon that had been in there long enough to resemble a tumor. Edit. On TSS. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the bacteria that causes TSS is either present in patient or not, like MRSA. TSS is not an inevitable consequence of disgusting tampon behavior. One that a colleague in OB/GYN shared a while back. A woman was in for a pelvic exam, is up in the stirrups, and my colleague has her fingers in up to the cervix. At this point, something possesses the woman to ask, and I quote, "So, do you ever think about stuffing a turkey while you're doing this?" My colleague, try to keep a straight face, answers, "No, but now I will every Thanksgiving." The woman finds this hilarious and proceeds to stare my colleague dead in the eye while yelling, "Gobble, gobble, 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 gobble," with my colleague's hand still up her hoodie-hoo. I still enjoy telling that story to friends at Thanksgiving. It means more turkey for moi. My mom works as a gynecologist's assistant, and she has told me a few stories. A woman once went in and apparently filled an entire room with her putrid stench. She had been wearing the same underwear for 2 months, and her panties, which were originally white, became a darkish yellow-brown. She apparently wasn't very good at wiping either. Not a gyno, but was an EMT/firefighter about 10 years back. Treated a very attractive woman who decided to dump about 4 ounces of Drano into / on her vagina to kill the sperm that her date left in her by accident. Just think of an English bulldog who got popped an Alka-Seltzer, got into a Costco-sized jar of mayo, and then was punched in the face about 10 times. That's what it resembled. To add to the awkward factor, about a year later, I met a very attractive woman at a grocery store, got her number, and met her for drinks. Later that night, we ended up at my place making out. As soon as I started taking her shirt off, I suddenly remembered that the girl who I had taken out for drinks was the one who previously dumped Drano into her vag. Our night ended abruptly and awkwardly, as you can imagine. This is a story from a friend's dad, happened 3 summers ago. An overweight woman comes into the office for an STD test and pelvic exam, complaining of colorful discharge, an awful stench, and burning during urination. She assumes she has gonorrhea. Wrong. It was much worse. He gets in there for the pelvic exam, all the while assaulted by the stench of rot, and finds a fucking dead frog in her vagina. This thing is heavily decomposed, since the warmth of the woman's vaginal cavity has helped to speed up the process, and he has to pull it out piece by piece. Needless to say, she also had a wicked UTI. The woman explained that she'd passed out naked and drunk/high/whatever at some party at her boyfriend's house, and figures he or one of his friends must have thought it would be an absolute riot to put a live fucking frog up her vag. She apparently did not seem bothered by the fact that an animal had died and decomposed in her vagina, just relieved she didn't have gonorrhea. Edit. For extra gross-out factor, it's worth knowing that this was in Memphis, Tennessee, where temperatures routinely get well over 100 F, with over 90% humidity. Think about that. Surgeon here. I was doing a pediatric surgical rotation when an 8-year-old girl was brought in by her parents in ER for vaginal bleeding. I was called in to have a look at her because the nurse could see something inside. Yep, there was stuff inside, and lots of it. Pencils. She used to pleasure herself with pencils. Took her to theater and removed more than 20 pencils from her. Scarred for life. Can never look at pencils without remembering that. 3rd year of medical school on my family medicine rotation, which I'm doing on my med school's campus academic health center. Electronic medical record shows 24-year-old with chief complaint of cough. So I go in to interview her. Where it comes to light, she's really there for vaginal itching. Finish up the interview and tell her I'm going to grab my attending for the pelvic exam. My attending tells me she'll let me do the pelvic if the patient consents. I had already done OB/GYN at this point and was quite comfortable with it. but we both agree I'd likely get asked to leave the room altogether. Lo and behold, patient consents. I do the pelvic. We write her a script for some antifungals, and she goes home. 2 days later, I'm teaching a small group of first-year students how to perform an abdominal physical exam. Teaching is a requirement of the family medicine rotation. When, during introductions, I come face-to-face with my patient who never mentioned she was a first-year student. We both play it off really cool at first, but during the session, her partner asks me to show him how to do an inguinal/femoral hernia examination on a female patient, aka his partner. While I'm doing my exam, she breaks out in hysterical laughter, which causes me to lose it and start laughing at the absurdity of the situation as well. She played it off like she was ticklish, and I said something stupid like, "I thought of something funny. Don't mind me." 2 weeks later, she returns to the clinic for a follow-up, and I go see her. We talk for a while about how she's feeling, how awkward our second meeting was, and then just shoot the shit for a bit when he goes, "So, when are you going to take me out to dinner?" I politely declined and explained I had a girlfriend at the time and never saw her again. TLDR, I did a pelvic exam on a girl who ended up being a fellow medical student, though 2 years behind me, and asked me on a date at her follow-up appointment. Oh, I have another, examining vaginal smear samples for infection under a microscope in the lab, with Rihanna Rude Boy playing in the background on the radio. I'm hearing Rihanna moaning, take it, baby, baby. Come here, Rude Boy boy, are you big enough?" through the speakers, while looking down the microscope at slides of gonorrhea, chlamydia, bacterial vaginosis, and spermatozoa swimming around. Maybe not awkward, but fucking hilarious, K. TLDR looking through microscope at slides of STIs, while slutty music is playing on radio. Oh, I actually kind of have a remotely applicable story for once. So, my mom had a patient come in who was pregnant, but the woman weighed approximately 9 jillion pounds. Okay, probably not that much, but the woman was morbidly obese. I'm talking electric scooter fat. Can't really move under her own steam fat. Her husband, however, was on the small side of normal. So while the patient is there, everyone is wondering how did they possibly manage to have actual sexual intercourse, most likely more than once, if the lady not only can't move, but has 100 pounds of fat in the way of her vagina. My mom is a very sweet, matter-of-fact lady who can get away with Jewist about anything, and she genuinely wanted to know what had worked for this particular patient, so she just asked. The patient told her that she and her husband were desperate to get pregnant, that she was getting older and didn't know if she'd ever be able to lose the weight. She said that in order to have sex, she had her sister come over and use a broomstick with one end wedged into a dresser drawer to hold back her fat so that her husband could get close enough to actually have sex with her. Yep, where there's a will, there's a way. The woman had all kinds of complications, but ultimately delivered C-section, a very healthy baby. Super late to the thread here. Not an OB/GYN, different specialty, but I've done my share of vaginal exams. I once admitted a 300-plus pound mentally handicapped woman to the hospital for some non-GYN issue. However, she had what I suspected to be a raging case of bacterial vaginosis because her whole room smelled like rotten zombie vagina. It was so bad the nurses moved her to a single room and put a fan in her room to move some air. Unfortunately, this meant that I would, at some point, have to do a pelvic exam. I put it off the first day, which turned out to be a mistake. The following day, I showed up to check things out. The nurses informed me that her handicapped boyfriend had been in the room all day with the door shut. I walked in before the exam, and the room was literally saturated with the smell of vaginosis. It was so thick in the air, I swear it was precipitating on my skin. I get her all positioned and have my med students hold her thighs open for me. Yes, hold her thigh fat out of the way. I go in with the speculum. Her vaginal walls are collapsing around the sides of the speculum because of her size, making visualization difficult. She has an abhorrent amount of vaginal discharge, which was probably from her BV. At this point, I'm breathing through my mouth, because I know if I so much as sniffle, I'll probably gag. The med students are looking away with a look of horror on their face, obviously having made the rookie mistake of breathing through their nose. In addition to her vaginal discharge, however, I notice what is very clearly semen. To this day, I still see her semen-filled infected vagina when I close my eyes. Back in the day, I got a tattoo that says, "Lucky You," right above my pubes. I also still had my hymen until I was in my early 20s. When the nurse was asking me about my sexual history, I basically told her I didn't have one. She kind of scoffed and said, "But you're here." "Yeah, so don't worry about it." When the doctor examined me and found out I still had a hymen, she told the nurse, who was still in the room. The doctor asked if she could show the nurse. I said sure. The nurse asked if she could show the other nurses. I said sure. Then I showed them my tattoo, and they pretty much lost their shit. Apparently hymens aren't very common in gyno offices.